Honored guests, the Fall 2021 Fall Convocation of Case Western Reserve University is hereby convened. Please remain standing for the singing of our national anthem, which will be played by University organist Peter Bennett and sung by Anna Skelton. If you wish to sing, please do keep your mask in place.
Stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you. Please be seated. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the president of Case Western Reserve University, Eric Kaler.
Thank you, Professor McGuffin-Cawley, and welcome faculty, staff, students, especially students, alumni, community members, and friends to our fall convocation. As you might know, I began my tenure as president of Case Western Reserve University just last month, and I arrived here by the way of the University of Minnesota, where I was the president for 8 years. So during the course of my career, I have been to a fair number of fall convocations, but honestly, none has taken place in a place as magnificent and beautiful as Severance Hall, where we are today. It is an honor for all of us to begin this academic year gathered together in this grand room to celebrate the opportunities, the innovation, the learning, and the growth that lie ahead. And in the coming months, you, our increasingly diverse university community, will first expand your curiosity in our classrooms. I hope you will conduct cutting-edge research. I know you will advance exceptional scholarship, you will make groundbreaking discoveries, and you will give heartfelt and beautiful performances just like the one we just heard. I hope you compete on our athletic teams and cultivate the connections that are so essential to us as human beings by building relationships with classmates, colleagues, friends, and community neighbors. Each of you and the work you do are the driving forces of Case Western Reserve University. Now, last week, I welcomed the undergraduate class of 2025. The class of 2025 is the university's largest, most diverse, and most academically accomplished in our history. It includes more than 1,600 first-year students from more than 1,150 different high schools in the U.S. and around the world. They represent 76 countries, and they speak 67 languages. I speak one language. 67 languages, it's a pretty diverse group. And 13% of those students are the first in their families to attend college. And so to our first year and new students, welcome to the Case Western Reserve family. You will find that we are a community that values inclusion and one that works very hard to ensure that you all have a sense of belonging. Each of you has a place here. Later in the program, Tracy K. Smith, whose poetry often explores belonging, will speak to you from the stage. Ms. Smith is the 2021 Elaine G. Hayden Distinguished Visiting Author. She is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, the former U.S. Poet Laureate, and the author of this year's Common Reading Selection, Wade in the Water, which you all first-year students have had. And together today, we will also present this year's Distinguished University Professors. Now, before we begin the formal part of the program, I want to acknowledge our trustees and emeriti trustees who are with us in person and online today. And I also want to recognize the individuals behind me. In addition to our 2021 Distinguished University Professors, we're joined by our Provost, Ben Benson III, our deans, vice presidents, the chairs of the Staff Advisory Council and Faculty Senate, and the presidents of our Undergraduate Student Government, Graduate Student Council, and Postdoctoral Researchers Association. And in the audience, in their academic regalia, are esteemed members of our faculty, and I thank them for being here today. And in fact, would you please stand so we can recognize our faculty for all they do for our students, our university, and society. Please, faculty. Today, we are joined by the Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees, Don Richards. Serving on our Board of Trustees since 2013, Don is a graduate of the Case Institute of Technology and the Weatherhead School of Management. He is the retired Senior Managing Director of Accenture's outsourcing businesses, and he owns Chase Advisors, LLC, which provides business and technology consulting services. Don has very generously funded 3 scholarships at Case Western Reserve: the Donald J. Richards Fellowship Endowment Fund for Masters of Engineering Management students at the Case School of Engineering, the Donald J. Richards Endowment Fund, and the Richards Family Endowed Scholarship. Don, we are immensely grateful for your leadership, wise counsel, and unwavering support of Case Western Reserve University, and it's now my pleasure to welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, President Gaylor. On behalf of Case Western's Board of Trustees, I am pleased to welcome everyone to the annual Fall Convocation. I'm also honored to serve on the board as we welcome the university's 11th president, Dr. Eric Kaler. During Fall Convocation, we honor our newest distinguished university professors for their unparalleled scholarship, their teaching, and their dedicated service to Case Western Reserve University. In addition to the 4 outstanding faculty members we will recognize today, we would like to recognize and acknowledge all of our faculty. On behalf of the board, we'd like to extend our special thanks to you faculty for the way you adapted to the challenges posed by the pandemic over the last year and a half. We really do appreciate your commitment to our university, and again, we value your guidance as our community prepares for this fall semester. Now to our students, new and returning, let me add my welcome. While we continue to be vigilant about remaining healthy and safe, we expect to resume a more normal campus experience this year. So I encourage all of you to engage in all aspects of campus life, all those things that we missed last year. Much of what you learn will come from outside the classroom, so my one word of advice is don't get too consumed in all of your studies. Get out there and take advantage of these opportunities. In the program for today's ceremony, which is posted on the Convocation website, you will find details for upcoming appearances by accomplished authors, celebrated thinkers, and talented performers. It is my hope that all of you will take advantage of these and many other exceptional opportunities that our university has to offer. Finally, I would like to congratulate President Kaler on his first fall convocation at Case Western Reserve. And I'll end by wishing everyone a safe, successful, and enjoyable academic year. Thank you.
Masks are important. Thank you, Don, for those thoughtful comments. And it's now my pleasure to welcome the president of the undergraduate student government, Sophie Villamara. Sophie joined me also in welcoming the class of 2025 last week. She is a fourth-year student in the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, and she's currently working on the heart and lung transplant floor of the Cleveland Clinic, where she hopes to continue her work once she receives her nursing license. After graduation, she hopes to attend law school and eventually engage in healthcare policy. Sophie is also a resident assistant and has been a tour guide and a teaching assistant for the Department of Philosophy. Please join me in welcoming Sophie.
Thank you, President Kaler, for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Villamara, and it is an honor to be here with you all today. This is the fourth year I've witnessed a new generation of CWRU students entering our campus, but this year in particular, the fresh energy is unparalleled. Whether you began your journey here 3 days ago or 30 years ago, I'm sure you're able to bask in the ambiance of opportunity that is at its height this time of year. We are here today to celebrate members of our community who have paved the way before us and cemented their legacy, while simultaneously celebrating the beautiful unknown of what our newest class of students will bring. I am absolutely privileged to witness new CWRU legacies in the making. As our undergraduate student government president, I connect student opinions to CWRU's administration to advocate for improvements across campus. USG's mission hinges upon the timeless truth that all members of the CWRU community are committed to endless improvement, and that the student voice is paramount in guiding that direction. These partnerships across the CWRU community have never been so strong as over the course of the past year. For example, USG, in partnership with other student organizations like the Undergraduate Diversity Collaborative, helped create a task force called For a Better Crew. This initiative was composed of several student-led committees that isolated areas of improvement at CWRU in different realms, including racial justice, LGBTQ+ inclusivity, and sexual misconduct. Each committee curated a proposal, and we as a community are currently following through on these proposals together. USG members also created the Physical Resource Center, or PRC, which serves as a free store propelled solely by student donations. A fateful coincidence alongside intense dedication allowed us to create and run the PRC in Uptown, right next to Mitchell's for all of last year. In addition, USG enacted a COVID-19 emergency fund so that students could request money to help fund living expenses. We were able to fulfill hundreds of reimbursement requests working alongside compassionate members of our administration. In short, over the past year, we witnessed an exponential growth in student activism and leadership, yielding in some of our most significant progress yet as a community. Yet, this work is never complete. Each accomplishment and improvement we make is certainly gratifying, but the resolution of old challenges always reveals new ones for us to address. And this is why we, at CWRU, are so blessed, because we have a wealth of student leaders, faculty members, and administrators who are always willing to put in more, even when the effort requires long hours and the road seems very difficult. We can be quite hard on ourselves sometimes. We set goals for ourselves, fulfill them, and then very soon after, fixate on something new to achieve. This desire to keep moving forward is what makes our campus culture so dynamic, because it ensures we don't stagnate in our values and allows us to continue our work towards a campus where all have equal opportunities to succeed. However, it is through taking a step back and truly appreciating what we've already achieved that we can feel empowered to take on the challenges of an uncertain future. As we start on this new journey to return to some semblance of normalcy, we must treasure all that we have already accomplished. When we look at one another, we see the product of a life's work, but the behind-the-scenes efforts often go unnoticed. The pieces of our life that occur when nobody's watching, when we hold ourselves to the highest standards possible because we believe in our own power. I want to take a moment to recognize those instances of strength that every single one of you exhibited to be where you are today. It's those personal moments when you actively decide to do better that help us grow as a community, and is the reason why we can gather here today in any capacity safely. Together, I hope we can take a few moments to acknowledge that we are here where we are right now because we have met the challenges of academia alongside that of a pandemic with resilience. From stocking up on non-perishables in order to minimize contact with the outside world, to completing college application processes during a very uncertain time, required you to take a huge leap of faith in the universe. Despite that, you persisted. In a time when many of you had to cope with loss and redirection, you continued your intellectual pursuits. That aspect of yourself was unwavering. Even with an uncertain future, you sought knowledge and are continuing to do so. Think of where you are right now, not as a stepping stone to the next aspect of your life, but rather as the product of everything you have done. This might be hard. The unpausing motivation to improve is one trait that I have observed in every CWRU affiliate that I have come across. But if we do not divert from this mentality, we spend our entire lives in a transition period. Allow yourself to feel proud of all you have accomplished. Sink into your seat with the comfort of knowing that your life's hard work has allowed you to be right here where you are today. Whether you are here to be recognized or just here to take it all in, you are exactly where you should be, and that alone is cause for celebration. So today, let's commit ourselves to the CWRU legacy of perpetual improvement, while at the same time celebrating all that brought us here to this moment. And let's ensure that we carry the spirit with us through the rest of our lives. If I can leave you with one thought today, it's this: all of the hard work you put in does not go unnoticed, for it is an integral building block in making CWRU the illustrious institution it is today. Even as your newest challenges begin to materialize, take time to acknowledge your immeasurable strength. Welcome all to another new school year, and thank you.
Now it is my privilege to introduce this year's class of distinguished university professors. These faculty members are internationally renowned in their fields and are deeply engaged in the life of the university. They advance their fields through discovery, scholarly work, and service to national and international organizations in their areas of expertise. They also advance us. They advance Case Western Reserve through their teaching, mentoring, collaboration, research, and service. As you might imagine, the title of Distinguished University Professor is the single highest honor the university can bestow on a member of our faculty. And in your programs, you will find biographies of each of today's honorees. I encourage you to read about their truly remarkable accomplishments. New Distinguished University Professors, when I call your name, please step forward. As I describe your accomplishments and your career, Provost Ben Vincent will place the medal around your neck. First, Timothy Beal is the Florence Harkness Professor of Religion in the Department of Religious Studies and Program Faculty in Environmental Studies. The College of Arts and Sciences Dean Joy Ward called Professor Beal a model humanist who has elevated the visibility of the humanities. Professor Beal's published works include many monographs, peer-reviewed journal articles, and book chapters, and 9 single-authored books. His book, Roadside Religion, In Search of the Sacred, the Strange, and the Substance of Faith, was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. His most recent book, pay attention to this title, The Book of Revelation, a Biography. Professor Beal won a Public Scholar Award from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And as a prominent scholar, Professor Beal frequently appears in the national news media. His essays have been published in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and he has appeared on National Public Radio's All Things Considered. Over the course of his career, Professor Beal has been awarded 17 national grants and fellowships, several of which are on a scale rarely seen within the humanities. Professor Beal has been a longtime favorite among students. He was nominated 4 times for the Carl F. Whitke Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, and he was nominated 3 times for the John S. Dieckhoff Award for Distinguished Graduate Mentoring. Since his appointment in 1999, Professor Beal has served in several leadership positions at the university, including Director of the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities, Chair of the Department of Religious Studies, Chair of the Common Reading Selection Committee, and Interim Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Currently, he is Director of H-Lab, where his work represents one of the most creative attempts I know about to bring new technologies to bear on research in the humanities. Professor Beal, for your commitment to students and for your many valuable and important contributions to the humanities and to Case Western Reserve, it is my great honor to confer upon you the title of Distinguished University Professor. Congratulations. Next, Faye Gary is the Medical Mutual of Ohio and Kent W. Clapp Endowed Chair and Professor of Nursing at the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing. Professor Gary's career spans a half-century, and the impact of her research and scholarship extends well beyond the field of nursing. She has devoted her work to the mental health of children and to improving the mental health and well-being of vulnerable populations. The Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing Dean Carol Musil called Professor Gary a trailblazer and an innovative and productive scholar. Raised in the Jim Crow South, Professor Gary's higher education options, career choice, and even the focus of her scholarship was deeply influenced by segregation. Despite earning her bachelor's degree in nursing and sociology at Florida A&M, she was denied admission to several Northern universities' graduate programs. She persisted and earned her master's in psychiatric nursing from Santa Xavier University. Professor Gary continued her education at the University of Florida, where she completed her Doctor of Education in Special Education in Anthropology. Then, as a faculty member at the University of Florida, Professor Gary grew her interest in working with underprivileged minorities. For 15 years, she taught ethics at Florida juvenile detention centers, leading discussions on justice. As a scholar, Professor Gary is a thought leader and a prolific writer. She's authored more than 100 publications in scientific journals, textbooks, chapters, and monographs, and currently she's editing another text. Throughout her career, Professor Gary has been held in high regard by her colleagues. She was appointed by the Honorable Donna E. Shalala to serve as a member of the National Advisory Committee on Rural Health. She also served on a task force on ethics and professional conduct for the United Nations Commission on Refugees. And as a W.K. Kellogg Foundation Fellow and working with the USAID, she served as a consultant to ministers of health on 6 continents. Today, she serves as an international consultant to the University of Eswatini in the former Swaziland. Professor Gary has received more than 30 honors from national and international organizations, and in 2018, she received the Melba Jo Hendricks Lectureship Award from the International Society of Psychiatric Mental Health Nurses. This award recognized her commitment to improving care for the underserved, stigmatized, and disenfranchised who live with mental illness. She has received the highest honors from the National Black Nurses Association, including the Lifetime Achievement Award, the Nurse Educator, and the Nurse Researcher of the Year awards. She was the recipient of an American Council on Education Scholarship and worked closely with the Reverend Timothy Healy at Georgetown University. And Reverend Healy was known for increasing Georgetown's minority student enrollment in the 1980s. Professor Gary has worked on more than 22 research and training grants totaling more than $24 million. She is also the visionary behind Case Western Reserve's Provost Scholars Program, which she established in 2013 with the support of former Provost Bud Baselak. This groundbreaking program has positively impacted more than 100 students from East Cleveland schools and from Cleveland Metropolitan School District's Ginn Academy. The students receive mentoring and tutoring from university faculty, staff, and students to prepare them to be successful undergraduates. Professor Gary, for your commitment to improving the lives of those living with mental illness, your advocacy for the vulnerable, your efforts to create opportunities for young people, and for all you have done for this university. It is my great honor to confer upon you the title of Distinguished University Professor. Congratulations. Next, Mukesh K. Jain is Professor of Medicine at the School of Medicine. At university hospitals, he holds the following positions. He is the Chief Academic Officer at University Hospitals Health System, Chief Scientific Officer at the Harrington Discovery Institute, and is the Ellery Sledgwick Chair and Distinguished Scientist. If that's not enough, he's also a visiting professor at the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. Dr. Jain is recognized for his pioneering work with KLF proteins, which are linked to control of the immune and metabolic systems. His work has illuminated new biology and provided the foundation for novel therapies to combat obesity, diabetes, heart failure, and dementia. His work has been published in top-tier journals, and he is frequently invited to speak at premier meetings in major academic medical centers around the world. His research accomplishments have garnered robust grant support and have led to his election to the prestigious National Academy of Medicine. According to the School of Medicine Dean Stan Gerson, Dr. Jain's level of mentoring and accomplishment is unparalleled across the School of Medicine. His personal mentees have earned prestigious fellowships and awards, and they are also among the faculty at leading universities and colleges, including Harvard Medical School, the University of Tokyo, and of course, Case Western Reserve. Dr. Jain's commitment to the Cleveland biomedical community has been deep and sustained. Over the past 15 years, he has led a number of initiatives aligning research and education between Case Western Reserve, university hospitals, and other academic partners within the city. He built the Case Cardiovascular Research Institute from the ground up and grew it to nearly 100 faculty and staff when he served as its founding director. He also served as principal investigator of the Cardiovascular Research Training Program. In this program, research trainees are supported by the clinical divisions at all three of the city's major hospital networks and our science and engineering departments. On a national level, Dr. Jain was president of the American Society for Clinical Investigation, one of the country's oldest and most prestigious medical organizations. And with 2 Nobel laureates, he co-founded the Physician Scientist Support Foundation, a nonprofit that seeks to grow and diversify the physician scientist workforce. Dr. Jain, for your commitment to your students, for your many valuable and important contributions to the field of medicine, and for everything you have done here at Case Western Reserve, it is my great honor to confer upon you the title of Distinguished University Professor. Congratulations. Finally, I really am tempted, so I just will say last but not least, John Lewandowski is the Arthur P. Amington Professor of Engineering II and a professor in the Department of Material Science and Engineering. Professor Lewandowski's accomplishments over the past 35 years at Case Western Reserve University are truly noteworthy. He's among the department's most motivating teachers based on course ratings and indirect feedback. Case School of Engineering Dean Raghu Balakrishnana shared, quote, "The secret source of Professor Lewandowski's high impact on our students is his collegial style, which breaks the ice and truly engages students to work with him." It is no surprise to learn that last year, despite the restricted access to campus, Professor Lewandowski found creative ways to teach an important laboratory course. It turns out that he personally mailed specimens for a lab to the homes of his students, one of whom lives in Spain. And because of efforts like this, his students achieved higher performance and marked their appreciation with higher course ratings than even in previous years. Professor Lewandowski has mentored and supported 80 graduate students, 31 PhD students, and more than 50 postdoctoral researchers and visiting scholars. His published work includes more than 345 journal publications, 25 edited books, book chapters, and major research reviews. Professor Lewandowski also established the Advanced Manufacturing and Mechanical Reliability Center, an important core facility here at the university. And over the course of his career, he's received approximately 160 grants, totaling nearly $40 million in funding. Professor Lewandowski is a trusted and respected leader who has served on several university committees, and he's received many teaching and research awards, including the ASM Albert Easton White Distinguished Teacher Award, which recognizes long and devoted service in teaching, material science, and engineering. Professor Lewandowski, for your commitment to students and for your important contributions to the field of material science and engineering and to Case Western Reserve, it is my great honor to confer upon you the title of Distinguished University Professor. Congratulations. Really a remarkable group. And now we move to the portion of our program focusing on our common reading. First, I want to acknowledge the late Elaine Laney Hayden, a beloved member of our community who endowed this annual lecture starting in 2012. We're profoundly grateful for her years of extraordinary engagement with our university. More than 40 years ago, she became the first woman to chair what was then known as the Board of Overseers, and she served as a university trustee for 27 years. We are honored that her daughters, Allie, who is here in person, and Kesey, who lives in California and is watching online, could join us. Thank you for being here. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce the former U.S. Poet Laureate, Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, and Elaine G. Hayden Distinguished Visiting Author for 2021, Tracy K. Smith. At Harvard University, she is a professor of English and African American Studies and the Susan F. and Kenneth L. Wallach Professor at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. We are so honored that Ms. Smith joins us as our esteemed guest to discuss her book of poetry and this year's common reading selection, Wade in the Water. Wade in the Water is Ms. Smith's fourth collection of poems and winner of the 2019 Annisfeld Wolf Book Award. And a review of her book by NPR.org noted, quote, "In these poems, with both gentleness and severity, Smith generously accepts what is an unusually public burden for an American poet, bringing national strife home and finding the global in the local." Distinguished university professor and chair of the Common Reading Group Committee, Tim Beal, shared that, quote, "Smith is a brilliant poet and a gifted teacher, as Wade in the Water attests. At once lyrical, critical, and deeply thoughtful, her poems will open spaces for us to explore some of today's most urgent questions. It is an honor for our first-year students to have had the opportunity to explore Ms. Smith's work and to study it further this fall semester. And today, we welcome Ms. Smith to Case Western University and thank her for helping us enhance the education of our first-year students. Now, will you please help me welcome to the podium Tracy K. Smith.
Thank you so much. Just hearing the commitments and the achievements of your distinguished faculty members makes me feel so grateful and excited and hopeful to be part of the larger academic community that I think all of us are contributing to, and to the imaginative community that constitutes. It makes me feel like the tools to repair all the many wounds in our culture, old and new, are here among us. And it makes me that much more grateful to be here with you today, in person, and also in spirit. So thank you for including me. And thank you also for including my work in the lead-in to this year. I want to talk a little bit about where I find myself at this moment, a year and a half after the onset of multiple national and global crises. But I'd also like to tell you a little bit about where Wade in the Water, which you've all spent some time with, comes from. I started writing those poems in 2011 and finished that book in 2016. And during that time, I was burdened with a kind of fear that the history that I had long been taught to understand was safely behind us, fixed in place, kind of bordered by progress. I had the fear that it was catching up with us, that it had somehow wriggled out of whatever was holding it once in place. And suddenly questions of racial injustice, questions of social division, questions of gender-based inequity, fear and intolerance of many different kinds, as well as a general feeling of unjust dominion over the planet, all of those things felt and feel so pressing and prevalent. And one way of thinking about the present, I understand, in art, is to cast our gaze in a different direction. The book that I wrote before Wade in the Water chose the direction of the imagined future through the lens of something like science fiction to think about my anxieties of the present moment that book emerged out of. Wade in the Water called me to think backward and downward toward the earth in revisiting founding documents like the Declaration of Independence, and revisiting archival material like the testimonies and correspondence of formerly enslaved veterans of the Civil War and their families and descendants, in looking at family correspondence between a family called the Joneses of South Carolina, who happened to be a slaveholding family. Mining those old materials for a whiff or just a soundbite of something that could be newly useful, something that maybe all of us in all of our rush toward resolution had overlooked or misheard or misunderstood. The thing that I think is so magical and interesting about poetry, about language, is that if you ask it to tell you something, it often finds a way to do that. And I almost felt frightened at first looking at something like the Declaration of Independence and saying, how can this speak to a moment in American history where violence against unarmed Black citizens or a mistrust of others of different stripes feels so automatic? And that document rose to the occasion and reminded me that the early settlers' first grievance against England also seemed to capture some of the sense of grievance that many marginalized communities in the present day America justly feel. Language is really exciting, life is really exciting, and the voices and stories of other people can be so transformative for us if we choose to listen. I'll talk a little bit about what I intended to talk about, but I also want to get back to those poems. Coming here, planning to come here, I was very overwhelmed and a little bit nervous about the fact that this is really my first return to public collective life in real time, in real space, and maybe that's true for some of you now. The fear has kind of given way to a feeling of joy that we're returning to places and practices and sites of community that were interrupted or rather disrupted by COVID, by the crisis of racial injustice, by a crisis of climate change, just to name some of the sources of our current consternation. I feel like we've been hearing wishful or determined statements about returning to normal practically every day since we learned about what COVID was. But that word, the word that's been so much on my lips for this year and a half is soon. Soon we'll send the kids back to school. Soon we'll be able to go about our business with ease and confidence. Soon, in many ways, is now for us as the academic year at Case Western Reserve and elsewhere begins. It's kind of miraculous to be here together. But the feeling of what we are returning to in many ways is still an unknown variable. It's still very much a possibility. In no small part, what we are returning to or beginning is very much in our hands. Every time I do something again for the first time, I find myself thinking, how did this used to go? What did I used to do when I boarded a plane or ordered in a restaurant? I asked myself that question the first time I hugged a friend in 2021. I know I'll go through that same line of questioning a week from now when I teach my own first in-person poetry class since 2020. I know I'll feel it again in another week from then when I send my own kids off to in-person school. That little flurry of panicked anticipation that precedes every such return to one of the habits and practices that I had to make do without for so long. And maybe this is also familiar that it doesn't bear mentioning, but the reason I bring it up is because there's something valuable in that process of questioning and remembering and straining to figure out, how did this used to feel? What did I used to do? To my mind, or maybe to my conscience, there's something supremely important about allowing our previously involuntary and unconscious choices and actions to become conscious and intentional, to become a source of questioning. Stopping to think about how we do things and why is important. Just as there's something important about stopping to think what our choices and our actions mean to the comfort and safety of other people and other living beings. Stopping, thinking, and caring in these and other ways, I am firmly convinced, is essential not just to getting back to normal, but to our collective recovery, to the repair not just of what disruption in day-to-day life has damaged, but to the damage that we've become more aware has always been present, and that's been exacerbated by the changes of this past year. Determining what we want to do and how to do it means that we have to ask ourselves who we are. I, for one, know that I'm not the person I was in the second or third week of March 2020 when COVID emerged and everything shut down for what I thought would be a few weeks. I know I'm no longer the person I was on May 25th of that same year when Amy Cooper, a white woman in Central Park, was caught on video making false accusations to a 911 dispatcher about Christian Cooper, a black bird watcher who asked her to leash her dog. One of the oldest mechanisms of American racism, a white woman's false allegation against a black man, replayed itself again before our eyes like a case study. Only it ended differently. Christian Cooper was not questioned or captured or carried off by a mob. Amy Cooper was caught out in her lie, America's age-old lie. That same day, George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill, was murdered by police officer Derek Chauvin. We know the details of that, which was also captured on video. That also held the key to something age-old and quintessentially American, and it kindled uprisings, protests, calls for justice, and a movement. There have been other pandemics, racialized threats and violence have marred America since its inception, but I'm certain that America has also inexorably changed in the past year. The loss of life that we went on to witness, to COVID, to the inequities it exacerbated, to brutality or violence, intolerance, revealed how truly vulnerable all of us are to one another and to our fragile social systems, and also perhaps to our own fears and unthinking misassessments of other people. The events of the past year have shaken many of us out of an easy stupor of expected comfort or assumed safety, taken for granted accord between ourselves and others. I see my world, which is by and large America, differently as a result of the stark realizations and continuous reckoning of this time. To the extent that our public health crisis has been somewhat adapted to, it's not vanquished. COVID, like our country's congenital crisis of racial injustice, and like the crisis stemming from the untenable power dynamic we've struck with the planet itself, will continue to shift and morph until we're collectively awake to its true scale, until we are collectively willing to shift and morph ourselves in adequate enough ways. I went through this naive or hopeful moment in the spring of 2020 where I thought that the universities, like the one where I taught, and institutions and systems of order and justice and law would solve these problems that had revealed themselves, where I even believed that the corporations and the arts organizations who said they were committed to righting all of these societal wrongs would fix things. But of course they couldn't, because to fix things is such a massive undertaking that it requires not only systems and policies, but a radical recalibration of our collective imagination. And that's work that we have to do ourselves in private and in spaces that we move through and build together. I feel like there are many different tools in this room for doing that. The tool that I'm most familiar with and partial toward is language. It's poetry. It's the site where I discover pure possibility and my own capacity to manipulate and enlarge and accelerate different possibilities. One of the realizations that Wade in the Water helped me move toward went beyond clarifying the wrong, the heaviness, the sorrow, and it illuminated a capacity that I don't think I had been thinking enough about, and that's love. And I guess compassion is another word for that same power that each of us has recourse to. I recognize in those poems the sense that choosing to look at ourselves and others differently, more courageously, is one of the most important things we can do. Learning to ask, who am I? What does it feel like to be me? And to understand that in answering that question, you're also opening up another question. Who are you? Who is that other person that's so far from me that I'll probably never meet them in real time? And what is real for them? And what do they feel? And what do I owe them? I'd like to read a couple of the poems from Wade in the Water. some of the poems that feel most relevant to the kind of hope and the sense of courageous seeing that I'm eager to do and to invite you to do. And maybe I'll start with the title poem. I've said many times that I was doing research in coastal Georgia and traveling to plantations, sites of slave auctions, unmarked sites of horrific realities. And I felt angry and sad. And on the last night of this research trip, I went to a ring shout. There was a group of performers who are dedicated to sharing an African-American tradition that has roots in West Africa, whereby people gather together and sing spirituals and dance to a rhythmic kind of music, and it's a form of praise and a form of healing and community. In case you don't remember, the spirituals are songs that date back to the days of slavery, and they always have a surface meaning, which is often retelling a story from the Old Testament or giving voice to one of the promises that God has offered people via the Bible. But the subterranean story is about escaping to freedom from slavery. So a song like Wade in the Water is about when God delivered the Israelites from Egypt, troubling the water to make it possible for them to flee. But it's also about the fact that if you walk in water, you're more difficult to trace or track. And so people who were fleeing slavery walked in creeks and bodies of water so they couldn't be tracked by hounds. Wade in the water. For the Geechee Gullah ring shouters. One of the women greeted me. "I love you," she said. She didn't know me, but I believed her, and a terrible new ache rolled over in my chest, like in a room where the drapes have been swept back. "I love you. I love you," as she continued down the hall, past other strangers, each feeling pierced suddenly by pillars of heavy light. I love you throughout the performance, in every hand clap, every stomp. I love you in the rusted iron chains someone was made to drag, until love let them be unclasped and left empty in the center of the ring. I love you in the water where they pretended to wade, singing that old blood-deep song that dragged us to those banks and cast us in. I love you, the angles of it scraping at each throat, shouldering past the swirling dust motes in those beams of light that whatever we now knew we could let ourselves feel knew to climb. Oh, woods. Oh, dogs. Oh, tree. Oh, gun. Oh, girl, run. Oh, miraculous many gone. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Is this love the trouble you promised? You might remember a photograph. I mean, you might have referenced it when you got to a poem called Unrest in Baton Rouge, that's several years old now, taken by a photojournalist named Jonathan Bachman. And it's a picture of a young black woman in just a gauzy sundress that's being blown back by wind, standing before a line of police officers in riot gear. I saw that image, I was asked to write a poem about it, and I wanted to push myself to get past what I initially captured in my own imagination, what that image captured, and to see something different, to see farther into it, to see something that could change me. And I began to find space for this phenomenon of love. And this is how I responded to that. Unrest in Baton Rouge. Our bodies run with ink-dark blood. Blood pools in the pavement's seams. Is it strange to say love is a language few practice, but all or near all speak? Even the men in black armor, the ones jangling handcuffs and keys, what else are they so buffered against, if not love's blade, sizing up the heart's familiar meat? We watch and grieve. We sleep, stir, eat. Love, the heart sliced open, gutted, clean. Love, naked almost in the everlasting street, skirt lifted by a different kind of breeze. Maybe what that image taught me to see or to remember is that love is something that exacts something of us. If I love you, then I'm suddenly being asked to be willing to give you something, to make space for something, to make your pain mine. And I think that's a very frightening thing, but I also believe that it's the key to solving a lot of the problems that we've created for ourselves. Maybe I'll read one additional poem from Wade in the Water before concluding, and it's a beatific. Once I got this idea that love and compassion were the lessons we might be here on earth to learn, and that all of the fallout of our fear of those lessons is things like injustice and unnecessary loss, I started to try and do these thought experiments and to practice looking at other people through a different and more generous or compassionate lens. It's not second nature. This is a poem called Beatific that's one of those thought exercises. I watch him bob across the intersection, squat legs bowed in black sweatpants. I watch him smile at nobody, at our traffic stopped to accommodate his slow going. His arms churn the air. His comic jog carries him nowhere. But it is as if he hears a voice in our idling engines calling him lithe, swift, prince of creation. Every least leaf shivers in the sun while we sit, bothered, late, captive to this thing commanding, wait for this man. Wait for him. I am seeking, or maybe struggling, to see myself through the kind of courageous eyes that I've been talking about. eyes willing to recognize my own inevitable failings and to accept that I too bear responsibility for the misfortune of others. So today, on this joyful reconvening, I want to invite you to look at yourselves in a similarly courageous way and to care about a larger and farther flung version of community, a community that includes people you may never meet face to face, but whom your choices inevitably touch. Now, I think there's great joy in this perspective and great hope. I think it has the ability to buoy us rather than weigh us down. I arrive at this perspective by reflecting on the ways my own mental health and psychic survival have been helped along this heavy past year and a half by far-off community, friends and family, of course. But I'm also talking about a wider web of connections to people and practices that I'm separated from by geographical distance, by boundaries of community, but also by the fact of time. So let me tell you what I mean. My own sense of loneliness or trauma or despair that came out of this past year sent me searching for a network that could help me feel ministered to and protected. In the heaviest moments when my own will to advocate emphatically for the kind of change that I believed in made me vulnerable to the fear or even the cruelty or the power of others, I sought help, not just from my friends and family or my personal bubble, but from any and everyone, alive or dead, whose voice and whose actions might reach and teach and console me. Meditating with eyes closed and heart and imagination open as wide as I could muster, I called out to some of my heroes, people like Lucille Clifton and James Baldwin and Frederick Douglass and others. I called out to them with equal adamancy as I called out to my deceased parents and grandparents and the nameless ancestors whose masterpiece was their survival in body and spirit. And because race was so central to my experience of the time and circumstances, I needed to think about ancestry in racial terms. But all of us, no matter who and where and when we are, belong to such a network. One way of understanding it is to call it humanity. And humanity in the fullness of its actuality is borderless. And I want to offer this mischievous idea that there's something larger than humanity that dwells alongside us. Trees, animals, the life-giving water that covers the life-giving earth. All of this is the community that we must learn to claim and to be accountable for and to. Maybe I'll close with the last poem in Wade in the Water, which is called An Old Story. So many of the poems, as you'll know from that book, turn toward history and toward founding myths. I felt like I wanted to try and write a new myth, a myth that would be uniquely useful to the time in which I felt us to be living. And so that's what this poem is. And if you write poems, or even if you don't, I want to invite you to do something like that. Write a myth of your own that could be useful to the present in which we find ourselves and clarifying to the future that you hope we might find ourselves one day in. An old story. We were made to understand. It would be terrible. Every small want, every niggling urge, every hate swollen to a kind of epic wind, livid the land and ravaged like a rageful dream. The worst in us, having taken over and broken the rest utterly down. A long age passed, when at last we knew how little would survive us, how little we had mended or built that was not now lost. Something large and old awoke. And then our singing brought on a different manner of weather. Then animals, long believed gone, crept down from trees. We took new stock of one another. We wept to be reminded of such color. Thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thoughtful and so thought-provoking. And now, please welcome back Anna Skelton, who will lead us in the singing of the Alma Mater. You will find the lyrics printed inside the back cover of your program. And again, if you wish to join us, and we hope that you do, in singing, please remain masked.
Shine on forever, Case Western Reserve. Loyal and true are we. Your brave sons and daughters, your knowledge we use to make our mark on history. Our school days will cherish forevermore a lifetime of friends from the start. Shine on forever, Case Western Reserve. You'll be forever in our hearts.
Honored guests, this concludes our fall convocation. I would like to again thank the Elaine G. Haddon Distinguished Visiting Author Tracy K. Smith, and invite all of you to join us at a book signing that will be held in the Tinkham-Veal University Center just to the east of Severance Hall. If you will, please remain standing while the academic procession exits the hall.